Hello viewers, my name is Dr. Zulqarnain Ahmed. I'm a GP in Bolton. I'll be talking to you about health, productivity and lifestyle, and the first thing which we will be talking about today is a book by Stephen Covey called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a very famous book, and the reason why I'm interested in is because of my interest in productivity and self-improvement, and this is probably one of the best to start with. So let's get into it. His belief is that the way we see the world is based on our perception. In order to change the world or a given situation, we need to change ourselves, and to change ourselves we need to change our perception. He studied 200 years of literature, and the result he found out was remarkable. He found out that before 1920 we were largely focused on something called character ethics, which is something like integrity, honesty, self-respect, humility. However, things changed after 1920, and after 1920 most of the success was based on something which he refers to as personality ethic. It's mainly about our public image, attitude and our behavior. This is merely a superficial approach, just the tip of the iceberg, and actually there's a lot more which we can't see, which is underneath. He's of the opinion that if we want to change ourselves on a given end of a given situation and better our lives, we need to change ourselves. To change ourselves, we need to work on our character ethic rather than the personality. In order to achieve a true change, we need a paradigm shift. So that was a bit of a background, so let's get into 7 habits. Number 1. Be proactive. Covey explains we are in charge of our life. Humans have inherited ability to examine our own behavior and how we view ourselves, and to control our effectiveness. Humans have remarkable ability to examine our own behavior and how we view ourselves. What that basically means is that we are reacting to the situation around us, and that's how we act. As we know, we have heard people saying, well, this is all I could do, this is how I am, basically referring subconsciously or consciously that problem is out there and I'm okay. However, proactive people are not reactionary. So basically they are in charge of their own life. Proactive people, on the other hand, recognize that they have responsibility, which Covey explains that is a combination of two words, response and ability, i.e. ability to respond, which he explains as ability to choose how we will act in a certain situation. So here he basically talks about quite an important concept in my view. If we imagine a circle and a small circle around us, and then if we imagine another small circle inside this big circle. So this big circle which is around us is basically our circle of concern, and the smaller circle is called the circle of influence. And what Covey argues is that most people would be focusing on the circle of concern rather than the circle of influence. So for example, in circle of concern are the things which are usually not in our control. For example, the way the world is, our world politics is, and how the wars are happening and how we can't do anything about it. If we are in that mode, our mindset, then we will be blaming people. So for example, we could blame the world leaders, or we could blame other people who are living in other parts of the world by saying that they are responsible for this chaos, and if it wasn't for them people, then we would be okay. However, the other view to look at this situation is to look at our circle of influence and what can we do in our capacity to make things better in this way, and that's where we should be focusing our energy. And the more we do it, the more energy we will get, and our circle of influence will become bigger and bigger, and as a result we become more successful. Now, the second habit he talks about is to begin with end in mind. This is quite an interesting concept, and what Stephen Covey explains in this regard is that most of us go through life and go through motions, but we don't really know what we really want from life, what our real aims and objectives are. And I really like this quote, which I am going to quote from the book. It is incredibly easy to get caught up in the activity trap, in the busyness of life. to work harder at climbing the ladder of success, only to discover that it was leaning against the wrong wall. He also talks about setting goals and how you will achieve them. In order to set our goals, we need to look at our values and base our goals on those values. And it's also important for us to find our center. And he explains it quite well in the book. So what that means is that we need to find out where our center is. So for example, some people are self-centered, some people are work-centered, some people are family-centered. So we need to align our center to our values. And basically what he argues is that rather than being centered around anything else or any other emotions or important things what we think in our life, we need to be principle-centered, which we talked about earlier in terms of character ethics. So things like integrity, humility, and all those kind of good qualities. The third habit which he talks about is put first things first. So which basically means that we need to prioritize ourselves. Most of us, as we know, we have busy lives and we go through lives, and there are some things which are urgent which we have to spend time on. There are some things which are less urgent but we still spend time on them. But basically what he argues in this habit is that we need to have a system in place, and in the book he explains in a table where you can write everything down. So third habit is put first things first. In order to be effective, we need to have discipline to prioritize ourselves, our day-to-day actions based on our emotions. In order to be effective, we must have a discipline to prioritize our day-to-day actions based on what's more important rather than what's more urgent. And by using this approach, he argues that we'll be able to better align with ourselves and our goals, and we will be more effective. In order to maintain discipline, we need to have the willpower to do something when we don't want to do it. He argues that most people spend their lives on things which might be either urgent or non-urgent but not important, and as a result they're ineffective. What I really picked up from this section was that it's important to learn to say no and also to delegate so that you can become more effective. Habit number 4 is think win-win. We live in a competitive world where we all think about winning all the time at any cost, but we don't particularly think about other people. So what he argues in this section is that we are interdependent in our relationship with other people, and we can only be really successful if we think about win-win and not win-lose situation. He argues that win-win is mutually beneficial because both parties are winning, and this relationship is mutually beneficial to each other. And in addition to that, it's also quite satisfying for both parties as well. One of the quotes from this section is to go for win-win. Not only you have to be nice, but you have to be courageous. And he also talks about the mentality in this section, and he talks about the mentality of scarcity and mentality of abundance. The mentality of scarcity means that if I win, you lose, and the other way around. However, the mentality of abundance means that there is plenty of stuff for everyone. However, mentality of scarcity means everything equals zero sum, so which basically means if I win, you lose. And he argues that most people are in this mentality, and as a result they find it really hard to accept the realities of life and also success of other people. And the people who have this mentality, they find it genuinely difficult to be happy about other people's success. And as a result, when they see success and other people succeeding, that brings a sort of negative energy into their body, which can result in negative emotions, and as a result you're not as effective as you could be otherwise. He argues that people fail to understand that when it comes to interpersonal leadership, the more genuine our character, higher our level of proactivity, the more committed we are to win-win, the more powerful our influence will be. And win-win can't survive in an environment of competition, so if you're an organization, you need to align your reward system along with this as well, so that everyone benefits, and as a result the whole organization will benefit. So the next section is seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is quite an interesting concept. Most of us and most people find it really hard to listen to other people, and what he argues in this section is that it's really important that we listen to other people, and not just listen, but we listen empathetically. And before we offer advice to other people and suggest solutions, we must seek to deeply understand them and their perspective through empathetic learning. And that's the only way which we will be able to help and benefit people. And he points out the estimate from communication expert that we only communicate with our words, which is about 10%, and 30% we communicate with our noises, and 60% by our body language. Listening to people empathetically, we put ourselves into their shoes, and as a result we can understand them better, and people are happy because they feel that they've been listened to. And that might be the only thing which other person wants from you. I'll give you an example from my own experience. So as I said earlier, I'm a GP. So for example, if someone comes to me who's a 40-year-old and he's got symptoms of, for example, diabetes, and there's another patient who's an 80-year-old and he's got the similar symptoms of diabetes, although the problem, as one might see, is exactly the same. However, the perspective might be completely different. So for example, if you assume that that 40-year-old person is a bus driver, his worry might be that because of this diabetes, he might lose his sight, and as a result, he might lose his job. However, for an 80-year-old, this might be completely irrelevant, and the only thing he might be worried about is losing a limb due to the problem with the circulation and becoming disabled as a result of that. So I'm not suggesting that that would be everyone's perspective, but you get the idea that people are different, and depending upon their perspective, then we need to understand the perspectives before offering any solution. So the way in which we might treat diabetes might be similar, but the perspective will sort of direct us toward the right approach. So the next habit he talks about is habit of synergy, which basically means that by understanding and valuing the difference in another person's perspective, we have the opportunity to create synergy, which will allow us to discover possibilities through openness and creativity, which can help us in getting on with people, and more specifically getting on with people who have differing views. And the last habit, and the seventh habit which he talks about, is sharpening the saw. I found this section really interesting, and in this section he talks about that in order to be effective, we must devote time to renewing ourselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, and socially. Will increase our ability to practice each habit. And he talks about different rituals here, for example, prayer, meditation, communication with nature, reading literature, listening to music, making contribution to a meaningful project. And in this section I've also come across another quote, which is one of my favorite quotes in the whole book, which is, "Not a day goes by that we can serve at least another person. Not a day goes by that we can't serve at least another human being by making deposits of unconditional love." And that was the summary and some of the reflections from the book. Hope you guys liked it.